So now, very exciting, I would like to introduce everyone to Dr. Jensen. It's very exciting to have him back here again. He's one of our best presenters, one of our favorite presenters for sure. And just a little bit about him before he starts today is Dr. Jensen is a former teacher who grew up in San Diego, California with a PhD in human development. He synthesizes brain research and develops practical applications for K-12 educators. Dr. Jensen co-founded an academic enrichment program held in 16 countries with over 65,000 graduates to help answer these two questions. One question, is it possible to turn struggling students around in just days or weeks? And second, if it is possible, what insights and strategies can help us do that in schools? He has written over 30 books, but today you'll get the movie trailers version. By the end of this session, you'll learn exactly how you can turn struggling students around and help them graduate and be college and career ready. Let's help welcome our guest, Dr. Eric Jensen.
Well, welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. It is my pleasure. We're going to have a good deal of fun. We'll learn a lot, and we'll finish up on time. Let's get started first with the slide that talks about leadership. You can be a leader in almost any role that you have. So I'm speaking to you as if you run a classroom, run a school, if you coach teachers. So in my opinion, just about everybody can be a leader. It just means you have a higher vision of things and you can energize action. As long as you're not after credit, you can make miracles happen. At the end of our brief session, I'll ask you for an ABCD idea. What do you agree with, buy into, and commit to? And I'll remind you to get your freebie. As I said, leaders are the type that can see further than those who are only looking down at their feet every day. And to find out a little bit about yourself, real quick poll. Could you please check what you see on the screen and figure out which one of these four is the most like you? We'll give you maybe 30 seconds to read it and then check the box. Go ahead, begin, please. Just a few more seconds. Finish up, please. Perfect. Thank you so much for letting us know just a bit about your purpose for attending this. And here's what we have with our group. We have almost a third are looking for some secrets. Over almost a fourth are administrators looking for how they can use this in their district. And some are just hungry learners. So thank you so much for completing that. First things first is, as an educator, always know what your impact is, meaning you work hard every day. You can't afford to do things that have no effect on your students. One huge problem that we have in education is that we don't have a good way to track everything that you do, and we don't have evidence to show that over time. For example, when I was 14 years old, two teachers helped me believe in myself as a writer. And 12 years later, I decided to write a book. Were those two connected? I don't know. But we don't have any evidence that they're connected, but nothing that says that they aren't connected. So it's good to know what we know so far about our evidence and about our impact. I'm just saying we don't know everything. One way to measure that is to know what your effect size is. Your effect size is simply a number. That's it. It's a number. And it's a standardized measure of the size of the gain or a loss when you use an intervention. So almost all of effect sizes are between 0 and 2. There are exceptions at both ends. Where the tipping point is for half above, half below, the median, is around 0.4. Things that are better than 0.4 we like more than what's below it, but the effect size is just one of many ways to guide us. Why is this important? Because leaders that are explicit with teachers and students about what does success look like, we like that effect size. 0.77 is more than a year's worth of progress. That's a solid number. Leaders that get staff to help them know and measure their impact. Effect size 0.91. We love those numbers. 1.0 is 2 years worth of gains. And you can see the other two up here have high effect sizes. What's the point I'm making? Leaders make a difference, and that's you. You make a big difference. So our brief session is going to highlight a few things that might help you shape your decision making. When I talk about cognitive capacity, it's really the sum. It's the sum of your mental actions that allow you to learn, process, understand, judge, recall. In other words, it's a lot of things put together. It's also your ability to do things like pay attention, defer gratification, hold things in your mind. In short, your cognitive capacity measures a great deal. So it's really a big, big term that encompasses a lot of smaller things. Greater cognitive capacity is correlated with better student learning and better achievement. So I'm always going to ask you if you want to be an evidence-based educator or not. If you are, then you'll look for things that have stronger gains, things that will help students learn more, and things that will help them do better in life as well as in school. An example would be, on the left-hand side, the developmental age of a student. That means developmentally, you go up the scale by age 4 or 5. Are they the same place as they are chronologically if you use the x-axis going across the bottom? So one thing we've noticed is that students that grow up under harsh circumstances, compared to middle-class learners, students who grow up in poverty will commonly, but not always, show up at school 1 or 2 or 3 years behind. That creates a gap. Why is this gap essential for you to know about? It's essential because an effect size of 0.50 means that you're getting about 1 year's worth of gains in the processes you use. So 0.50 works if your students are already at grade level. But if your students are behind grade level, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, then you have to set a higher bar. You have to set your bar that I'm going to help them gain and get up to grade level speed so that when they need certain skills at certain grades, they have them. So that's the focus of this particular webinar, is how are we going to do that? So let's find out what you already know about cognitive capacity. A simple question for you. Which school-based factor, meaning which type of behavior or trait or skill, if a student had it, would be even more important than their IQ, than their accumulated intelligence? Would it be A, B, C, D, E, F, or G? What would make the biggest difference in students that would be the strongest predictor of how they'll do in school? Go ahead and make your prediction and write it down. Go ahead, just write down the letter. Good. So the answer may surprise you. The answer is E for working memory. Working memory is a small but crucial skill that when students have it, school becomes much, much more possible, and success much, much more possible. So I want you to hold on to that idea and remember that. Working memory is a greater predictor than anything else you see on that slide. Now, let's move forward. So how do we move things forward from the big picture? Like we back up and now we're at, we're airplane high in the sky. These three tools I've discovered to be essential. Number one is you have to be able to have a strong why, both in yourself and your learners you work with. If you can't foster a strong why in others and in yourself, motivation drops. But even with a strong why, there has to be a clear path. A clear path is something that you can show a student that says, listen, there are 7 steps this year that you'll need to take to become excellent. The first step will complete in week 1. I will help you do that. I got your back. I won't let you fail. Let's roll up our sleeves and get ready to do the first step. If there is no clear path, you're expecting students to charge forward blindly, and not many will do that. There also has to be clear support. When students wonder, what do I do? Is there a plan for that? Is there a plan A, plan B, plan C? By the way, these 3 things, as you might guess, work if you're a leader and you're talking about growing your staff. A strong why, a clear path, and support will work. So let's dig in. Developing the why is a crucial skill. Many leaders are pushed into their job and they maybe know how to develop a strong why for themselves, but they don't know how to do this for others. A why is more important than the what or even the how. When your why is strong enough, people will find the what and the how that they need to. So I suggest one big thing. One big thing means that your staff is going to work together to find the one big thing that everybody says, we're behind you. We all believe in this. The one big thing is a systemic statement where everybody at the school who's a staff member, everybody who's there as a student says, yes, that's what we want to do. So the one big thing might be that your school preps 100% of their students for life success. And there's plenty of other options. There's even a website listed on the right side of the slide that has a lot of these one big things. The point is this. Everybody at your school needs to be able to say, yes, that's why I come to work. Yes, I'm behind this. Yes, I believe in that. If you don't have one big thing that everybody at the school says, that's what I work for, that's what we do every day, that's important to me, you will always have staff that will go in scattered directions. There are many ways to foster the one big thing. Once you've got that, remember that everyone's still an individual. So individual means that you want to help individuals foster a strong why too. So the why is always developmental, which means that if I'm a student who is 6 years old and you say to that student, oh, I got an idea, this will be fun. Many 6-year-old students will be so excited, way more excited than if you said, if you do this, it'll help increase your chances of going to a university someday. So they're just not ready for that. But for a student that's 16 years old, that might be a stronger why. On the slide, you see 5 things that are in blue and 5 that are in red. In my opinion, these are strong, and these are universal drivers. One way to think about these is that everybody may have all of these to some degree. But when push comes to shove, when it's critical, when there's a time crunch, when someone has to make a choice between, for example, earning more money or giving that up to get another benefit instead, everyone will make a choice. And what you see on here are real human drivers that real humans care about. And for some, job security is important because feeding their family is important, and that will be a primary driver. For others, a deeper sense of meaning is important. For others, they foster their identity, like this is who I am. Others foster a sense of mastery, like I want to become really, really good at what I do. The bottom line is let your staff choose which one of these is strongest and help them foster that more in the workplace, and they will use that why to help drive them to higher levels. Remember, everybody has the why. Everybody does. You just need to uncover that. So our three tools, once again, a strong why, a clear path, and support. So my question is, what is your one big thing, your own personal driver, the why, that you discovered from the list of blue things or red things? What one or two things seem like they stood out for you? Go ahead and jot them down real quick, and I'll put those back up on the screen, and then you can jot those down on a piece of paper. Here is the list. Just on a piece of paper, jot down one from the blue and one from the red that are really strong. Go ahead, begin, please. You have 25 seconds. All right, here we go. Let's move ahead. The first thing to understand is what drives you. What drives you so that you move forward? So we've identified some things that can drive you. The second thing is to have a clear path. Some educators have so much insight that it's almost like they can get inside the heads of their students. If you could do that, here is what you would care about. You would say, my students have to know that they have the capacity, that they believe that they belong in an academic community, meaning your classroom, that they feel that the adults value and respect them, that they know that their own culture that they bring every day is respected. They can see a viable, believable set of steps, the path, and they know their teacher's an ally and not an adversary. Why am I telling you these? Any one of these that you slip up, any one of these that you forget, and you will muddy up, you will erase, you will ruin the clear path that students need. Remember, this is a cognitive path that they need, like, good, I can take this step, this step, this step, and this step. Without those in place, your students will struggle. Make sure every student can see and believe in a clear path. So we're going to focus on fewer but more effective cognitive capacity builders. Truth is, you could build 10 or 15 things. You just don't have enough time for that. So when brains were actually measured, those who came from lower socioeconomic status were different than those from higher socioeconomic status. I graphed out the differences. Notice brain functions that were different. The biggest difference was the brown area in language capacity. That was different. That's why many schools spend extra time fostering language. But notice number 2 and notice number 3 with the arrows. Working memory is a big difference. Long-term memory is a big difference. And even in dark green, cognitive control is a big difference. What am I saying with you? Those are distinct cognitive skill builders that have to be in play. They're a little bit like an app for your brain, the way you'd have an app on a smartphone. The effect size of teaching cognitive skill builders is crazy high. Check these numbers. They're all over 1.0, which means they're all 2 or more years worth of gains. These are possible because of a core trait of the human brain, which is called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is neither good nor bad. It's an intrinsic property of the human brain. You can do bad things to your brain and it will change to adapt towards those. For example, addictions. You can do good things to your brain. For example, attend a webinar, and your brain will change. So doing more of the right things allows you to be able to gain neuroplasticity in a good way and build students' brains. Now, some teachers actually don't believe that all students can change. Why would they believe that if they're in the education profession? Here's why. Because they have been around other people that aren't succeeding at it, including themselves, and they haven't seen what could happen. So they're just living out of their own experience. If they don't see amazing things happen, if they don't see the magic, if they don't see great changes, they just don't think they're possible. So what does determine our destiny? The answer is many things. Many things do. Genes do account for a part of how we are. They are clear determiners of things like eye color, skin color, hair color, susceptibility to diseases. They do play a big part. We also have a lot of genetic differences. We'll call those genetic polymorphisms, which are just slight differences in our genes from one person to the next. So one person is more susceptible to the same thing that someone else is not susceptible. The environment is part of how we turn out. But a new science is the middle. It's called epigenetics. This field of science is simple. What epigenetics says is that we now know that the environment influences our genes. Not by a little bit, but by a lot. First, we used to think that genes and environment were totally separate. Then some people said, well, environment can modify genes, as in suppress them or allow them to be expressed. And then a few years later, more clear science emerged until we see that the environment can actually have multiple access tools to not just suppress genes or allow them to be expressed, but literally change the genes. The details of this are not the reason for this webinar, but if you're interested, there's a lot of great science in the field of epigenetics. Google the term and you'll get probably millions of hits on it. So we said earlier that neuroplasticity can change the brain, so let's check on that in a real school setting. Students were given a reading assignment, 9 days, 30 minutes a day. In this case, it happened to be a novel. It could have been nonfiction. The pre and the post measuring tool was an MRI. So they were literally taking a soft tissue X-ray of the brain before this 9 days began. At the end of the 9 days, students had gotten 270 minutes of reading. On the screen, you see a lot of red dots and connecting lines. Every one of those was showing brand new connections in the brain of the student that read for 270 minutes. That's amazing documented brain changes from reading. So you can force that to happen with really smart technology. For example, for decades, I've always told others that I like the Fast Forward Reading program. I like that because it goes right after the underlying brain deficits. It builds key areas, and you can get gains pretty fast. So check this change out in the brain. In this study, MRIs were used once again. 14 weeks intense text learning. How did the brain change in 14 weeks? Guess what? Green areas showed a decrease in brain areas, and red areas showed an increase. Scientists never knew that this happened. 14 weeks. So this is under 4 months that students' brains change, and it changed a lot. Brains change when you teach them vocabulary skills, and in this case, the study's shown that they were correlated with greater gray matter and higher test scores. In this case, they showed brand new fibers showing a modified cognitive processing had changed the brain. And smart teaching changes the brain. In the brain on the left, this student was starting off and they were getting an fMRI, which is active imaging, top down, and you can see where the orange and the yellow is. it showed areas of the brain that were active had nothing to do with reading. 2 months later, same student is in the middle, their brain totally changed. And this was the result of the fast-forward reading training. I'm showing you this because the right techniques, the right training over time makes miracles happen in our brain. One problem many struggling readers have is they do not process the sounds correctly in order to read well. Phonological, meaning the processing of sounds, is a big deal for reading. On the left, you can see in blue the effect size is 0.86 and higher. We love high effect sizes like that. When that happens, brains change. In the center of the screen, you see a brain, and you're looking at the left hemisphere, and the frontal lobes are on the left. That's in the center picture. But there's almost no activity in the green circles. There should have been. Why? It was a rhyming activity. On the left is a healthy reader. That's what you should have seen, but you didn't. But check out on the far right, 2 months later after retraining the brain, it's completely a different brain. We love seeing clear scientific evidence that brains can change. My way of thinking about that is DNA is not your destiny. Never let people think that DNA keeps them stuck. The environment can change them, epigenetics can change them, and we can grow a lot. So one option is to trying to build in-house assets, like with your faculty, so that you can raise cognitive capacity. When you want to turn struggling readers around, the steps forward are simple. In green, ask all of the right questions. In blue, make the big decisions. In pink, decide how and when you'll start up. In yellow, monitor progress. And in orange, monitor progress, and in yellow, keep assessing. Now, this process works no matter what reading program you use. If you decide to go with Fast Forward, I know you'll love it. The idea behind this is have a clear plan for turning your readers around. Don't just say, we're going to do this and we'll figure it out. Make sure you've got a plan. Now you can build the system in your school with something like a Fast Forward program. So you do not want bad programs or boring software programs. Get ones that engage students. That's why I like Fast Forward. It targets the must-have reading skills, which are the academic vocabulary, the working memory, phonological processing, and phonemic awareness. Scientific Learning does have a special offer, and make sure you check that out. We'll show you this one more time at the end. That allows you to take a small group of struggling students and give them a trial to see how that works. Why? We know that if you like it, you'll do more. So how do we incorporate tools into our own work? One tool is working memory. What is working memory? Working memory is a narrow subskill, meaning working memory is there's two ways that we store things short term that are cognitive. So it could just be short-term memory, which means if I said to my students, today we're going to do 3 things. How many things? And the kids yell back, 3. So that's short-term auditory memory. Working memory is different. It's different because you not only hold the information, but you manipulate the information. And that's the important difference. Both are important for students in school. Both types of short-term memory, but working memory is something where you can hold it and manipulate it. The core understanding about working memory is the only things it holds are sounds and pictures. Why is this essential? It doesn't hold taste. It doesn't store physical movements. It doesn't store feelings. It's just sounds and pictures. So working memory is the one that was from the quiz that I gave you at the beginning. High effect sizes, critical. It's a driver of cognition. It's required for everything you do in thinking. Students who grow up poor have a weaker one, and the good news is it's teachable. Study after study shows that even with a placebo, meaning they're getting something that's fake that they believed it was working, they do better and they show gains with working memory training. Effect sizes with working memory teaching, we love these great numbers, so we know it's a good thing. In this study, working memory was used, and after only 5 days, there were clear differences in the brain. We love seeing clear evidence in the brain. The areas that you see in red were showing brand new gray matter in the brain. We love seeing that. That shows us we're doing something healthy for the brain and that it's happening quickly. In this particular study, they were using working memory training with mental calculation. So this works with students that are developmentally ready for that. For example, with a first grade student who's, let's say, 6 years old, you can't say to that student, all right, here's your number 6. You got that? The kid says, yes. Good. In your mind, I want you to add to that number 6, add 11 to it. What do you got? And most kids who are 6 years old won't know that. Some would, but most won't. And in this study, they said, great, now that you've added 11 and you said 17, add 4, now add 8, now add 2. In other words, giving a running total of things requires a lot of heavy cognitive load with working memory. But you should be able to do that with students who are a little bit older. Starting by, for example, students who are maybe 10 years old, you should be able to do that. But I'm going to show you how you do this well. First of all, anytime you teach cognitive capacity, always start with the big why. Make sure they know why they're doing this. So the why is different for a 6-year-old student, which might be to have fun, which might be if you do really well, you'll be able to go to the next grade, or it might be your parents will be really happy if you can get better at this. So make sure there's a where in place. With secondary students, it's different. Sometimes secondary students will like something if it's a little bit risky. Sometimes they want something that they can do if it's a big project for a community that they live in. Sometimes just to gain social status, they'll do it. But always remember, without buy-in, you're not going to get the results. So my favorite phrase is, if the brain's not buying, the brain's not changing. The other thing to understand about working memory is cognitive processes follow paths in the brain. So the big box about building cognitive capacity, just to visualize it, it's a huge toolbox. A smaller section in the toolbox might be memory. A smaller box within the memory might be short-term, long-term, working memory. Now there's other types, but those are just one way to think about it. So out of those, we'll pick working memory. If you choose working memory, check out the slide up on the screen now. It could be auditory memory, the sound of my voice, or it could be visual, what you see. Those are completely different pathways in your brain. And your brain also has different symbol systems. So, for example, the text that you see on a page, that's a symbol system. But a different one would be all numbers text or equation numbers. Those are completely different to your brain. So what I'm saying is whatever you decide to do, if you taught working memory, would be to stay in the same pathway the whole time. In other words, don't keep switching from auditory to visual. If it's visual, show students something or their partner shows them something and they write it down. So that's visual. Or they hear it and they say the answer to a partner or to somebody in a team. So keep those distinct. Otherwise, you water down the progress you make until it becomes so diluted. It's like putting 1 tea bag in 6 gallons of water. It's not going to taste much like tea. So you want to use clear pathways that you stick to it. So could a student have a teacher that taught auditory language arts pathways and a different one that taught visual math science? Yes. The reason you could do that is because they each have to dedicate time to doing that. You can't break the time down into half for each. Each of those would need 10 to 15 minutes a day, 3 to 5 days a week. And that would be for about 8 to 12 weeks to see some progress. Once again, 3 to 5 days a week, 10 to 15 minutes a day. And by the way, that's consecutive minutes, not 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. It's got to be consecutive minutes. Anything you do that lasts for a minute or 2 minutes, the brain thinks it's just an event. It's just noise in your life. It's got to go 10 to 15 minutes. And remember to put in the why first with accountability. So working memory changes the brain. It fosters a lot of connectivity, and it's healthy, and it shows up in the classroom. What's an example of working memory? Up on the screen, you see 3 letters. Do not write anything down. Just look at the 3 letters and move those 3 letters around to form a 3-letter word out of it. Beautiful. You might come up with a word like PAT or TAP or APT. All of those are where you can move things in your head around. If you had to stop and write things down, that means that the task might have been harder for you. So when you want to teach working memory, you have to remember that some of your students who struggle have to be started at the very beginning. How do you do that? Ask students to take one small object and put it underneath their hand. The object could be a piece of plastic, a piece of wood, a letter of the alphabet, a paper clip, something small enough to hide underneath each hand. So when your students have something underneath each hand, you say to your students, great, now you've got something underneath each hand. Now tell the neighbor next to you, what do you have under your right hand? Here's what will probably happen. They'll need to sneak a peek and look at it. Why? Because their memory's bad and they will have forgotten. Don't stop them from doing that. Say, good, now that you remembered what it is, tell your neighbor what it is. Good. Now, what's under your left hand? Chances are they will have already forgotten that. So they'll keep checking. This is okay. They don't trust themselves. They don't hold images very well in their head. Over time, by doing this, you'll be able to have them move one hand lower and the other one higher. So now it's as if there was a clock in front of them with something at 12 o'clock, one hand at 12 and one at 6 o'clock. Then say, now what's underneath each hand? They will have already forgotten. Say, you can peek. Let them peek under each one and say out loud what's under it. Now, move your hands the other way so that one's at the bottom and the other's at the top. And can you remember what's underneath each hand? This may seem so simple to you, but to your students, it's hard and it's important. Why? They're doing the same thing that you are doing in your brain with these 3 letters, TPA. If you can do this mentally, that's what you're trying to get your students to do with an object underneath their hands until finally they'll be able to get better at it. Another way to build their working memory skills when they're a beginner is to ask them to draw a grid. So there's 9 boxes. It's just tic-tac-toe with nothing in it. So when they draw that, ask them to close their eyes and then tell their neighbor what is inside each of the boxes, and they should say, there's nothing there. Now ask them with their eyes closed to draw the boxes just with their finger out in front. You're trying to build the visual skills to hold something in their head. This sounds simple, but it's critical to do this. Over time, ask them to write numbers in each of the boxes, then ask them to close their eyes and ask them to remember. So what is the first number? Where is that box? Point to it. Where does number 8? Close your eyes. Where's number 8? And pretty soon they'll be able to remember things by spatially, where are they? Once they can do that, they can start remembering objects in their brain. An egg, a carrot, an ice cream cone. And pretty soon they'll be able to remember 2 things. They'll be able to remember something they put in the top row of their box, in the middle row, and the bottom row. Pretty soon they'll be able to remember what's in the left column and over time in the right column. This might take weeks to get them there. They might be able to remember 2 things together. There's a duck and a banana, and then ask them to cover up the picture. What's in the picture? It's a duck and a banana. And then there's a dog and an orange. And pretty soon they'll be able to remember what happens if you switch the 2. This sounds simple to you, but this is hard work for your students. Soon they'll be able to take two letters, and you'll ask them to tell a neighbor, a partner right next to them, what are the two letters if you spelled them backwards? And they'd have to say EH or OT or YB. And over time, I mean weeks and weeks and weeks, they'll be able to take a string of letters like ATR and rearrange those three letters and come up with a word. This sounds hard to some people. It will be hard, but over time, they'll be able to come up with three different words, like the word ART, TAR, RAT, or going down to the bottom, the word POTS, or STOP, or STOP, or OPTS. That's 4 words using my working memory. No, I didn't write those words down. The idea behind this is you have to start where your students are at. You can start them on 2-letter words and go to 3-letter words and to 4-letter words. So they need a clear success path. So you'll want to break it down and say, week 1, we will learn to build in our heads a grid of 9 spaces. Week 2, we'll learn to put things in spaces, numbers and objects. Week 3, and on and on. If you like learning things like this, I have a site for you to go to. It gives you working memory tools to build cognitive capacity. I'll give you 2 sites, so write these down while this is on the screen. My website is jensenlearning.com and /5cog secrets, 5cog secrets. Or you can go to jensenlearning.com /working memory. Either of those 2 will give you a free download that'll give you ways to build working memory. Those are just some of the tools that you can use to help your students become smarter. So we said everybody you work with should have a clear path. Without the clear path that I showed you, they won't believe that it's possible. This is an example of the clear path that they should have. So without that, they're not going to do well. Finally, there's got to be enough support for them. The third big thing is support. So what do I mean by support? Support could be time. Support could be resources. It could be people. A support could be a tiny nudge. An example of a nudge might be that when students finish one thing, there's a little bit of a reward. It could be somebody gives them a high five, somebody says thank you. Or before they do that, there's a Post-it in front of them that says, remember to do this next. Nudges are small things that influence behaviors. So many of those help students feel supported as well as getting person-to-person contact. So I share this because when we started, we said, be sure to have a big why, be sure to have a clear path, and be sure to have support. Support begins with things like a nudge, people, resources, and time. So we started with that notion that we could build brains. And we're going to finish up, although we're going to get to some questions that you're going to ask, finish up with what's the ABCD? What do you agree with, buy into, and willing to commit to? I do want to make sure you get your freebies. I suggested 2 freebies that came from my website. Scientific Learning has a freebie for a free trial offer, so check that out. And before you go anywhere, 2 things are important. One, I'm going to ask you a question, and second, I'm going to ask you to submit a question. Here's our question for you. Transfer time. Real quick, what have you learned and how might you apply this in your job? So it just means how you're going to transfer what we're doing. This will take you literally 2 or 3 sentences and maybe 40 seconds. Jump in and please start typing. Ready, get set. What did you learn and how are you going to apply it? Get set, go. Finish up, last few seconds. What did you learn? How might you use it? Maybe your favorite thing was why, a path, and support. Last few seconds. Finish up, please. And time's up. Beautiful. So it's now question time. There's going to be a window off to the right. I so much appreciate you investing in yourself today, investing in your students, investing in your school. Now's the time for some Q&A. Carrie's going to zip through them quickly and just read some out to me, and I'll give it a go and see how many of these I can answer for you. So,
okay, thank you, Dr. Jensen. That was a great presentation. So you had, on slide 20, you had talked about creating a clear path, which relies on students knowing, believing, feeling, and seeing a variety of social aspects in the classroom to have a clear path to cognitive success. By the time students show up in my high school English class, they tend to have mistaken beliefs about these social relationships. They don't see me as an ally, despite the actions I take to build that trust. They don't participate in the process of learning. They just want to get the tasks done quickly. How can we account for the fact that we can't control the perceptions of students to create a clear path? That was a lot, but it's a good question.
Thank you for the question. Short answer. You have to be willing to nibble at perceptions over time. Just because students show up on day one a certain way, you mentally have to say, game on. I'm going to let them know I'm on their side. For example, one high-performing teacher that I know will say it explicitly to their students when they walk in the class. This teacher teaches honors biology. She says to her students, it's a pleasure to be here. I love teaching this class, and more important, I love having you in my class. She just comes out and says that, and she says to her students, and to prove that, I'm going to guarantee every one of you will get an A or B in my class if you do only one thing. And here's the one thing. You help another student get an A or B, and you'll get one too. Notice what she's already done. She said, I'm your ally, not your adversary. Second, in my class, I will guarantee that you will succeed as long as you put out the work and do the effort. So the third thing she said, you belong in my academic community. Also, when students show up in her class and they look up front, at the front of the room, it says honors biology. She said some students come up to her and says, I don't know if I'm supposed to be in this class. Most teachers wouldn't know better. They'd look at the roster. Bad idea. Don't look at the roster. Look at the student in the eyes and say, with a smile, I would love to have you in my class. Find a seat. Thank you for being here. Notice the question they're really asking is, can I, me, do honors biology? Not am I on your roster. Later on, go up to that student and say, listen, give me your name again. I want to see, and check with the roster. Later on, if they give you their name and they are on the roster, say, see, I told you, you belong here. If they say, your teacher says, thank you for your name. I don't see it on the roster, but if you'd like to stay in my class, I will fight for you to stay in this class with the administration. Notice how this teacher bent reality. Notice how this teacher was different. Notice how this teacher has gone to bat 5 different ways with our students in the first 10 minutes of class. What I'm saying is be willing to nibble at this with small things with your students and never give up on trying to bend the perception your way. Thank you for the question.
Wow, I have to say, Dr. Jensen, that was a really, really good question and a really good answer. I could feel like I was one of those students I would have heard that. So wow, what an amazing way to do it. So the next question is, people have always been using different methods to reach different types of learners. Does this mean that one approach is right, one approach is wrong? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, briefly. As everyone knows that there are easily hundreds of reading programs. My only question is, how are your students doing? In other words, whatever you're using, if it's working, stay with it. If you've got a great reading teacher at your school and you have a great program and it's working, use it. To me, the best program is the one that's working for your students, and students are not only getting better, but they love to read. What the Fast Forward program does differently is it targets the underlying problems. It also gives the deliberate practice day after day after day, meaning it's as if the teacher's never sick. It's as if the teacher has a great attitude every day. They learn all of this through gaming technology, which kids like. They learn phonological processing, working memory, academic vocabulary. So if your process at your school is doing that, bingo, you just hit the jackpot. If it's not, just check out Fast Forward. That's how I feel about it. I just want your kids to read. How they do that is less important to me, but I want them to read. I hope you do too.
Yeah, no, totally agree with that one too. Next question is, we are seeing a much larger population of students with executive functioning needs. Is this trend happening everywhere? Will focusing on working memory improve executive functioning?
Yes, their evidence is super strong. I agree that executive functioning has changed for many students. There are multiple reasons for this. Long-term data shows that living accommodations and housing and parental support have all changed in the last 30 years for students. In other words, they're growing up differently. Secondly, the advent of technology is changing students' brains. So what we see is we see weaker executive function skills, although some are stronger in different areas. So the point I make is working memory is the closest thing you have to a magic bullet, perfect pill to help the majority of your students. That's why I give a plug for it. There is no downside to it. Thanks for the question.
Okay, next question. Are there, and I don't know the answer to this, are there any working memory books to recommend to parents? Any books out there that might be good, or articles or anything that you can think of?
Well, first of all, I think what parents need to know from you is why working memory is important. Here's the clear path we're going to use with your daughter or son in class, and that you're going to provide support for them. Not many parents would read a scientific journal study on the power of working memory, and there are thousands, maybe only hundreds, but there's a ton of them. So I would make whatever you give to parents a simple one-page thing that can be emailed to them. Like, here is why we're doing working memory. Working memory matters. It's a high predictor. Here are the effect sizes. Here's the plan we have for your son or daughter, and here's the support we're going to give. That's what parents need to know. They can always Google stuff and find plenty of the science online. I don't think most parents want to know the science as much as, what are you doing for my son or daughter while they're at school? Thank you.
Okay, here's a question, and there's a couple of questions that are sort of in this same vein. We've got an instructional coach asking, how do you change the mindsets of teachers who have negative or fixed mindsets? Another question that came in is, how I'm a teacher, how do I talk to my principal, about doing things differently? Any thoughts about that type of thing?
Well, I think both of those questions, you're going after changing other people. Very few people change their mind based on persuasion tools or evidence. Most people you have a chance to change their mind if there is a relationship there first, and secondly, if you ask the right questions. So that's going to be my takeaway. When you talk to leadership, fostering a relationship first, and then asking the right questions, such as, what is it that's important to you as a leader in our school? And another question, where would you rank building students' cognitive capacity in the grand scale of things. And if they said, oh, that would be a top 5 thing, then you'd ask, so because it sounds pretty important to you, would you be interested in something that we could do that would foster that? So notice it was all asking questions instead of trying to persuade them. So people, the short answer to this is you have to find out what people care about and then say, if there was a way that we could foster that was cheap or free, would you be interested? So finding where people's interests are and asking the questions to support them will help them find a better way to change mindsets. Like if you're a coach and you're trying to get a teacher to change mindsets, one of my questions is, how important is it for you that this student succeeds this school year? That's a pretty important question, isn't it? So if they say, well, it's not important at all, then I would say, how about that they succeed, period, in school? How important is that? I need to find something that is a value for them, that's a driver for them, that they would care about. And you could go to the list of the 5 red drivers, the 5 blue drivers, and ask questions that would help tap into this. For example, under social status, I would say to a teacher, how would you feel if you were the only teacher on campus to succeed with this student? How would others feel about you? That would feel pretty good, wouldn't it? So notice I just tapped into their quest for social status. So that's the answer to the question, is always build relationship and go after what's important to them so your agenda fits in with what they're asking for. Thank you.
No, totally makes sense. So this is going to be our last question because we're getting close to the top of the hour here. Does it benefit all students to learn and improve working memory, or should we focus just on the kids from poverty?
Well, listen, every student can benefit, even students who are, for example, doing well in school. They will love the activities. So there's no downside to teaching this. Those that will benefit the most will be those who are behind grade level. So that's where I would go with this process, is that it benefits everybody. You just want to make sure that what you're doing has the appropriate challenge level for the students you're working with. So students who are doing pretty well in school, you can start off with much higher level activities than those that are struggling and at the very beginning. That's all I'd say, is it's worth it for everybody.
Wonderful. Okay, so we are at the top of the hour, and I want to answer 1 or 2 more questions here. I'm getting a bunch of questions about, was this recorded? Will we get the link to the recording? And the answer is yes. As of 2 hours from now, you can actually go back to your confirmation email or your reminder email and click the little join webinar button again, and you can actually see the webinar in about 2 hours from now. If you want to view it. But you will get the link to the webinar by end of day tomorrow. We want to thank Dr. Jensen. That was an awesome presentation today. So thank you so much for your time again. And I hope to see everybody online again soon. So have a great rest of your day, everyone, and we hope to see you online again soon. Thank you, Dr. Jensen.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day or night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.